Hey, what's up out there, everybody? I hope you're all fantastic in your worlds, and I want to thank you, as always, for swinging by the channel to check out a video. In this one, we're going to go back to December 1987 when a little comedy called Overboard was released, starring a true Hollywood power couple, that being Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. Gary Marshall directed this romantic comedy that was written by Leslie Dixon, which was actually inspired by the 1974 Italian film Swept Away, and despite the nostalgia that this movie has gained over the years, it wasn't really considered successful. It debuted at number 7 in the box office, just barely nudging out Fatal Attraction that was going into its 14th week and still killing it. It would go on to gross $27.7 million with an estimated budget of around $22 million, so the return wasn't so good for this one. In this story, a snobby heiress named Joanna, played at 2 amazing levels by Goldie Hawn, is just unnecessarily rude and just hostile to a blue-collar carpenter she hired named Dean, played by Kurt Russell. When the task of fixing her closet on this lavish yacht is not completed to her high standards, she refuses to pay for the job, going as far as to push Dean off the boat and tossing his tools in the water with him. It's a dick move. Dean thinks he's pretty much lost out, and he does go about his normal life, but a couple days later he sees this same woman on the news in a hospital with no memory of who she is, and he quickly comes up with the perfect way to compensate himself for the $600 plus tools, that being telling her that she is his wife so she can help take care of his 4 wild kids. Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn began dating back in 1983, so they were already a notable couple by the time this film came out. Hawn had her Oscar for her performance in Cactus Flower. She was just coming off the very charming comedy Wildcats the year prior, and Kurt Russell was growing as the action movie man, with leading roles in The Escape from New York, The Thing, as well as the great action movie Big Trouble in Little China the year before this one, all 3 of these movies of which were John Carpenter films. Hawn and Russell would also work together back in 1968 on a movie called The One and Only Genuine Original Family Band. It's a movie that I haven't seen, but one that I can say is in desperate need of a new title, and they also worked together on the drama Swing Shift back in 1984. This would be their first and last headlining film together, and despite its imperfections, I gotta say I love it, and I think it's a charming 80s comedy. I think Hawn and Russell are just absolutely fantastic together, and there is no denying that they make this film all that it is with their on-screen presence. I mean, the premise of amnesia causing one of the characters to think a family is really her own, to basically clean up the house and take care of them, all for just subtle compensation, just kind of sounds like something that's perfectly suited for an episode of Seinfeld, but I think it's really able to provide enough shenanigans for a dated romantic comedy that just lands plenty of laughs through some fun dialogue and plenty of physical humor. I think the dialogue was pretty clever, and overall the script from Leslie Dixon really does hold up pretty well over the years, despite some dated material in areas. I mean, she also wrote screenplays for films such as Outrageous Fortune and Mrs. Doubtfire, among many others, so she certainly does have range to her sense of humor, which I think was evident in this film. It starts out with just the comical situations right out of the gate, with Hawn embodying this arrogant heiress that is over the top in basically every possible stereotype imaginable, and clash with her is the rough around the edges carpenter that's just captured with endless charm through Kurt Russell. And their comical interactions are sold 100% through the highly animated performances from Hawn and Russell, and with some witty dialogue and crisp timing between them, I think the banter is still laughable all these years later. I mean, sure, the premise is a little outrageous, but it does frame up the layers of the story nicely to kind of keep the interest going. It really showcases the just life of wealth and materialistic living, and it's juxtaposed by the life of less fortunate and just having to scrape by to make ends meet, and it all works nicely to set up the just fish out of water situations for Hawn's character when she enters the life of Carpenter Dean and his group of crazy kids. She goes from the penthouse to the outhouse in this movie, and watching her reactions to the many scenarios and situations thrown at her, I think truly showcase a comical performance from Goldie Hawn. After being so rude and mean early on, seeing her deal with this overbloated version of lower class living is absolutely hilarious and as rewarding for the viewer as it is for Dean, who for a bulk of the film could not be more prouder of himself. And it's something that's just really captured through just endless charm of Russell, who has just, he's extremely charismatic in this role. It works perfectly for the character. He's a couple stages above a primate, but there's kind of a heart and a sincerity to him, and Russell is able to portray that just enough to make Dean a likable character despite his cruel deceit. The story pacing overall is pretty steady, and just as Han's character starts to kind of warm up to her fake family and the levels of guilt begin to pile up for Dean and for the viewer, it does start to close itself out without sticking around too long. I'll admit there are some holes in the story, and while the chemistry between Russell and Han was there for comedic purposes and just it does a little bit of building the love dynamic, I think that aspect of the film was not overly developed. It's clearly a fairy tale ending. It's on the contrived side, but it works for that happy Hollywood ending where characters have grown and everybody is kind of rewarded with what was missing in their lives before the film starts. But I think the laughs hold up, and it manages to kind of layer some emotional undertones to the storyline without undercutting the lighthearted humor. To me, this movie is 80s comedy in all the ways that you would want. The musical score from Alan Silvestri is pretty solid. It adds a lot of life and enthusiasm to the story, and throughout it does a good job of keeping the mood up when needed. The production design was awesome with this house from hell, and the wardrobe design is going to forever lock this film in the 80s. Overboard, it's not a perfect comedy, but it's a fun one with a lot of appeal, and that's what you want in this genre. It's a lively film that captures the chemistry between Russell and Han with a lot of charm. It makes this film very engaging. There's just kind of an atmosphere to this movie that's just naturally appealing, and it certainly comes from the energy given off by the two leads. So I'm going to give Overboard a solid 80% on the entertainment meter. It's still a great time. The laughs hold up pretty well, as do the performances from Russell and Han. Like I mentioned, there are some story holes and a lot of conveniences as well, but they don't hinder the fun this movie delivers. A lot of comedies from the 80s are not so easily watchable nowadays, but this one still is, with just a lot of funny lines, wacky physical humor, and pretty much everything in between. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, drop it a thumbs up, leave a comment below. I'd love to talk movies with you guys. Share it with your friends, and without question, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you can never miss a video. Here are some links to some recent reviews just in case you missed them. All my social media links and the link to our official website are down in the description below, and I'll catch you next time.